The gun was already pressed against the back of her head before she could scream. Cold metal. Steady hand. And a silence so thick it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Sarah didn't move. She didn't blink. She stood there in the middle of that dark, wood-paneled room with her heart slamming against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest before the rest of her did. The party music from down the hall was still playing. Muffled bass, laughter, glasses clinking, and somehow that made it worse. People were dancing 30 feet away while she stood here, possibly about to die, and nobody knew. Nobody was coming. She exhaled slowly and whispered, "I was just looking for the bathroom." Nobody laughed. That was 3 hours ago. But let's go back to where it actually started, because Sarah almost didn't come to this party at all. Her name was Sarah Mensah. 22 years old. 5'4". Natural hair she hadn't properly done in 2 weeks because she'd been too stressed to think about it. She had arrived in the city of Harlow 11 days ago with one suitcase, $400, a phone with a cracked screen, and a missing brother she hadn't stopped thinking about for 4 months. She was not the kind of girl who went to parties. She was the kind of girl who sat on the edge of a motel bed at midnight, staring at her brother's last text message and wondering what she had missed. The kind of girl who called hospitals, filed reports, knocked on doors in neighborhoods she probably shouldn't have been in alone. She was quiet, careful, and she paid attention to everything, a habit she had developed young because in the Mensah household, missing the details meant missing the warning signs. Her brother's name was Kofi. 26. Smart mouth, soft heart. He had moved to Harlow 8 months before she did, chasing a job opportunity he'd been vague about over the phone. Then 4 months ago, the calls stopped. The texts went unanswered. His landlord said he had moved out overnight. His work said he never showed up. And every police officer Sarah had spoken to had looked at her with a particular kind of patience reserved for people they did not intend to help. So she had come herself. She was running out of money. She had 1 week left at the motel before she couldn't afford to stay. She needed to find a job, find her brother, and somehow hold herself together while doing both. And on this particular Friday evening, her only friend in the city, a girl named Lila she had met at a cafe 3 days ago, had convinced her that going to a party would help her relax. "You look like you're about to collapse," Lila had said, tilting her head with that easy, careless smile she always wore. "One night. Come on. You don't have to talk to anyone. Just breathe." Sarah had said no 3 times. Then she had looked at the 4 walls of her motel room and said yes. The party was at a penthouse on the 42nd floor of a building in the most expensive part of Harlow. Sarah knew the moment they stepped out of the elevator that this was not a normal party. The ceilings were high and marble white. The guests were draped in things that cost more than her entire year's rent. Security guards stood at corners with earpieces, watching the room with the stillness of people who were being paid to notice things other people weren't supposed to notice. "Lila," Sarah said quietly, touching her arm. "Who exactly lives here?" Lila laughed, that bright, airy laugh that never quite reached her eyes, Sarah would later realize. "A friend of a friend. Relax. Get a drink." Then Lila disappeared into the crowd, and Sarah was alone. She stood near the window with an untouched glass of something sparkling, watching. The city glittered 42 floors below her. Up here, everything smelled like expensive cologne and danger she couldn't quite name yet. She watched a man in a gray suit speak to another man near the staircase, both of them smiling, but neither smile touching their eyes. She watched a woman laugh too loudly at something and then immediately check someone's reaction before laughing again. She watched a security guard near the east hallway check his watch, then look at a door at the end of the corridor, then look away. She kept looking at that corridor. It was quieter than the rest of the party. Darker. The music faded the closer you got to it, swallowed up by something heavier in the air. She didn't know why she kept staring at it. She just did. Then her stomach turned. She needed the bathroom. She looked around. Nothing nearby. She spotted a server passing with a tray and stepped in front of him gently. "Excuse me, the bathroom?" The server pointed. "Down the hallway." She started walking. An older woman appeared at her elbow so suddenly that Sarah nearly gasped. She was elegant. Silver earrings, a deep green dress, the kind of poise that came from years of surviving difficult rooms. She looked at Sarah with an expression that was not quite fear and not quite pity but something uncomfortably close to both. "The bathroom is the other way, sweetheart." Her voice was low, deliberate. "You don't want to go down there." Sarah glanced down the hallway, then back at the woman. "I'll be quick." The woman held her gaze for one long second. "I'm sure you will," she said softly. And then she stepped back, and her expression closed like a door, and she turned and walked away. Sarah watched her go. Then she looked at the hallway again. Then she walked toward it. The music faded behind her with every step. The laughter faded. The sound of glasses faded. By the time she reached the door at the end of the corridor, it was almost completely silent. The door was heavy, dark wood, no label, no number. It was slightly open. Just barely. A sliver of dim gold light leaked through the gap. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was nothing like the party. It was serious in the way that certain spaces become serious when the people who occupy them treat them that way. Dark wooden panels on the walls. A single lamp on a large mahogany desk casting a low amber glow. Bookshelves. A leather chair. The smell of cedar and something colder underneath. On the desk, she saw it immediately, a stack of files. A phone face down. And a gun. Her brain registered all three in the same second, and then her brain did something interesting. It told her eyes to move upward, slowly, because something in the room was watching her. He was sitting in the shadows to the left. In a chair that seemed almost too still, like it had absorbed the stillness of the man sitting in it. He wasn't standing. He wasn't reaching for anything. He wasn't shouting for security. He was just sitting there, one ankle crossed over his knee, a glass of dark liquid balanced in his hand, watching her with eyes so calm it was terrifying. He was not what she expected. She didn't know what she expected, a bloated crime lord, maybe, something cartoonish enough to make this feel less real. But this man was lean and composed with sharp, unhurried features and the particular quality of stillness that does not come from peace. It comes from absolute control. He looked like someone who had never needed to raise his voice because the people around him had learned very quickly that his quiet was the last thing they ever heard before consequences arrived. He said nothing. She said, "I'm so sorry. I was looking for the bathroom. The server pointed me down here and I thought." He raised one hand. Slowly. Palm out. She stopped talking. He looked at her. Really looked at her, the way a person looks when they are reading something, not just seeing it. His eyes moved from her face to her hands to the door behind her and back to her face, and whatever equation he was running, she didn't know the answer to it. Then he said, quietly, "Who sent you?" "Nobody," she said immediately. "I promise. I needed the bathroom and I took a wrong turn and I'm sorry, I'll leave right now." She turned toward the door. The door opened before she reached it. The man who stepped through it was broad-shouldered and tight-jawed with a kind of energy that preceded violence the way thunder preceded rain. He saw Sarah, and something in his face went very still in the wrong way. "Marco," the man in the chair said it once. Quietly. Like a full sentence. Marco looked at his boss. Then back at Sarah. Then he grabbed her arm and slammed her against the wall with one smooth, practiced motion, and the breath left her body completely, and before she could pull it back something cold and hard pressed against the back of her skull. The gun. That moment. That was the flash-forward. That was where this story began. And now they were here. "I'll handle her," Marco said. His voice was completely flat. That was somehow scarier than if he had sounded angry. Sarah's vision was tilting at the edges. She was breathing too fast. Her hands were pressed flat against the wall and she could feel the wallpaper under her palms, and she focused on that, the texture, the raised pattern, because if she focused on anything else she was going to lose it completely, and she could not afford to lose it. Not here. Not in front of these men. "Don't," she heard herself say. Her voice was embarrassingly small. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Don't. Please. I don't know who you are. I don't know what this place is. I walked in here by accident, and I have no reason to lie about that because I have nothing. I am nobody. I am completely nobody." Silence. Then, "Marco." One word. Same quiet voice. Different weight. Marco didn't move for a moment. Then slowly, reluctantly, like a dog called off a chase, he lowered his arm. The pressure at the back of Sarah's head disappeared. She exhaled so hard her knees nearly buckled. She turned around slowly. The man, Yoo Jun, though she didn't know his name yet, was standing now. He had crossed the room without her hearing a single footstep. He was closer than she expected, and up close the calm was even more unnerving because it wasn't the calm of a man who didn't care. It was the calm of a man who had already decided, and was simply waiting to execute. He looked at her face for a long moment. "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't cruel either. It was simply the most certain sentence she had ever heard a human being speak, and her legs carried her to the chair across from his desk before her brain had finished processing the instruction. Marco moved to the door, locked it, stood in front of it with his arms folded. Sarah sat in the chair. Her hands were trembling very slightly in her lap, and she pressed them flat against her thighs so nobody would see. Yoo Jun walked back to his side of the desk. He picked up a glass of water, she hadn't seen him pour it, and set it in front of her. Then he sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at her with that unbearable patience. "Tell me who you are," he said. And because she had absolutely no other option, Sarah Mensah opened her mouth and started to talk. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe button, help us get to 1,000 subscribers. Your support means a lot to us, and drop a comment below telling me what you think about this story. She told him everything. Not because she trusted him. Not because she felt safe. But because the only thing more dangerous than talking in that room was lying in it, and some survival instinct buried deep in her chest told her that this man, whoever he was, would know the difference between the two within seconds. So she talked. She told him her name. She told him she was 22 and had grown up in a small flat in East London with her brother and their aunt after their mother got sick. She told him Kofi was the only family she had left that still answered the phone. She told him she had arrived in Harlow 11 days ago with $400 and a cracked phone screen and a brother who had been missing for 4 months and a police system that had looked her in the eye and done absolutely nothing. She told him she was not supposed to be at this party. That a girl named Lila had brought her. That she had said no 3 times before she said yes. That she had been standing by the window all evening feeling like she didn't belong, which she didn't, and that she had only walked down that corridor because her stomach hurt and she needed a bathroom and a server had pointed her in this direction and she had made a very, very stupid mistake. She stopped talking. The room was quiet. Yoo Jun had not moved once while she spoke. He hadn't taken notes. Hadn't shifted in his chair. Hadn't looked away. He had simply listened with that absolute, unnerving stillness, and now that she was finished, he continued to say nothing for a stretch of seconds that felt much longer than they were. Then he said, "How old is your brother?" She blinked. Of everything he could have asked, that was not what she expected. 26. His name. Kofi. Kofi Mensah. Nothing moved in Yoo Jun's face. "What did he tell you about his job here in Harlow?" Sarah felt something shift in the room. She couldn't explain it. It was like a pressure change, the way the air feels different right before a storm, when the sky hasn't done anything yet but your body already knows. He said it was a logistics job. Moving things. Coordinating shipments. He was always vague about the details, but Kofi was always vague. That was just him. He said the money was good and he'd explain everything properly when he was settled. She paused. He never got to explain. Yoo Jun looked at her for another long moment. Then he picked up his phone from the desk and dialed a number. One ring. Someone picked up immediately. "Mensah," Yoo Jun said. "Kofi. Pull everything." He hung up. Sarah stared at him. "What does that mean? Do you know him? Do you know where he is?" "It means I'm checking something." His voice was steady and gave nothing away. "While we wait, tell me about Lila." "She's just a girl I met at a cafe 3 days ago. We got talking, she seemed friendly, she invited me tonight." Sarah frowned. "Why? How did the conversation start? Who approached who?" Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. She was replaying it now. The cafe, the corner table, the way Lila had sat down across from her with that bright smile and commented on her laptop screensaver which was a photo of Kofi. The way she had asked about him so naturally. The way Sarah, starved for conversation and desperate for connection in a city where she knew no one, had talked more than she intended to. "She approached me," Sarah said slowly. The cold was spreading from her stomach upward. "She asked about my brother. I told her I was looking for him. She said she was sorry and that she knew the city well and could show me around. She looked at Yoo Jun. She set this up, didn't she?" Yoo Jun said nothing, which was the loudest answer he could have given. "She used me." Sarah said it quietly, not to him, just to hear it out loud. "To make it real. I told her everything about Kofi and she brought me here and, why? What was the point? What was I supposed to do? Just walk in here and—" "You weren't supposed to find me," Yoo Jun said. "You were supposed to be seen. At this party, on this floor, by the right people. Someone needed to know that Kofi Mensah had family in Harlow who was asking questions." He picked up the glass on his desk, looked at it, set it down without drinking. "You were a message. You just didn't know you were being sent." The silence that followed that sentence was a particular kind of awful. Sarah pressed her hands harder into her thighs. "A message to who?" "To me." She looked at him. "So someone used me to send you a message about my brother." She said it slowly, assembling it as she spoke. "Which means they know you know something about Kofi. Which means—" She stopped. Her voice dropped. "Where is my brother?" Yoo Jun looked at her for a long time. She could see him weighing something. She could almost feel the scales tipping back and forth behind those calm eyes. How much to say? What it would cost him? What it would cost her? "He's alive," Yoo Jun said. Sarah's breath left her body. Not the way it had when Marco slammed her against the wall. This was different. This was the kind of exhale that carries 4 months of terror out with it, the kind that leaves you hollow and shaking in the best possible way. Her eyes burned immediately, and she blinked hard, refusing to cry in this room, refusing to give this man or his locked door or Marco standing silently against the wall any piece of that grief. "Where?" she managed. "Somewhere safe. That's all I'll say. That's not enough. It's all I have for you right now." His voice didn't harden exactly. It just stayed where it was, unmovable. "Your brother got involved in moving things he shouldn't have moved for people he should never have trusted. When I found out he was being used in operations connected to my network without my knowledge, I moved him. Not out of charity." He said it plainly, without apology. "He had information I needed protected. Keeping him safe served me. That's the truth." Sarah stared at him. "So he's your what? Your prisoner? My guest?" A pause. "There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting." Something passed across Yoo Jun's face. It was brief and unreadable, but it was there. A flicker of something that was not quite amusement and not quite respect, but lived in the neighborhood of both. "Your brother is eating 3 meals a day and watching football on a television larger than the wall of your motel room. He is frustrated and restless and has complained about the Wi-Fi connection no less than 9 times since Tuesday. He is not being harmed." Sarah let out something between a laugh and a sob. She caught it quickly and pressed her lips together. That was so completely Kofi. The man would complain about Wi-Fi in a bunker. Why can't he leave? Because the people who were using him don't know where he is. And if he surfaces before I'm ready, they will find him. And unlike me, they have no reason to keep him comfortable. The weight of that settled over the room like a blanket that was too heavy to breathe under. Sarah understood the logic. She hated it, but she understood it. She had spent 4 months imagining the worst, and now the worst had been replaced by something complicated and dangerous but survivable, and her brain was struggling to adjust to the upgrade. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Yoo Jun tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Why do you assume I need something?" "Because you haven't thrown me out. You explained things to me that you didn't have to explain. You're not stupid, so there's a reason you're still talking to me." She held his gaze even though every nerve in her body was screaming at her to look away. "What do you need?" Before he could answer, the door rattled. Then Mako's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and the shift in his expression was immediate, sharp and dark and charged. He crossed the room in 4 strides and put his mouth close to Yoo Jun's ear. Whatever he said, it was 3 words. Short. Urgent. Yoo Jun's jaw tightened. Barely, a millimeter of movement, but in a face that had shown nothing all evening, it was seismic. He looked at Sarah. "The girl who brought you here tonight," he said. "Lila. She is currently downstairs having a conversation with two men who do not belong at this party. She has shown them something on her phone." One of the men made a call immediately afterward. Sarah felt the cold again, deeper this time. "What did she show them?" "We believe it was confirmation that you made it inside this room." The full shape of it hit her then. All of it. Lila spotting her at the cafe. Asking about Kofi. Building 3 days of fake friendship with the precise, patient efficiency of someone following instructions. Bringing her to this party. Pointing her toward that corridor. Had she pointed her? No, it was the server. But Lila had disappeared right before she went looking. Had that been deliberate? Had every single moment of the last 3 days been a performance designed to deliver Sarah Mensah to this floor, this hallway, this room? "She was never my friend," Sarah said. Her voice was flat now. The shock had burned off, and what was underneath it was something quieter and harder. "Not 1 second of it." "No," Yoo Jun said simply. "She could have just—" Sarah stopped. Breathed. "She could have gotten me killed." "Yes. And she did it anyway. People do extraordinary things for money and fear." He said it without drama, like a man who had spent his entire adult life watching that truth prove itself over and over. "She was afraid of someone. You were convenient. That is the only calculation that was made." Sarah sat with that for a moment. Then she looked up. "So what happens now?" Marco spoke from behind her. "We move. The men downstairs will come up within the next 10 minutes if they don't get confirmation from Lila that everything looks normal." Yoo Jun stood. He straightened his jacket with one smooth motion, unhurried, precise, like a man who refused to let urgency become panic. He moved to the bookshelf on the far wall, reached behind a particular volume, and pressed something. A section of the shelf swung inward 2 inches. A door. Of course there was a door. He turned to Sarah. "You have 2 options," he said. "I take you out through here, put you in a car, and you go back to your motel and forget every single thing about this evening. You never came to this party. You never walked into this room. You never heard any of this." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. Or. She already knew. There was an or. She had known since he started talking. "Or I take you out through here, and you trust me long enough to find out the whole truth about your brother, what he was moved into, and how to get him back to you safely." He reached into his jacket and produced a plain white card. Set it on the desk between them. A single phone number. Nothing else. "My terms. My timeline. My rules. You follow them without question or the deal ends." Sarah looked at the card. She thought about Kofi complaining about the Wi-Fi. She thought about Lila's smile, that bright, empty, practiced smile, and how she had been so hungry for kindness in the city that she had swallowed it whole without tasting it first. She thought about 4 months of closed doors and unhelpful officers and a motel room that smelled like carpet cleaner and defeat. She picked up the card. "1 condition," she said. Yoo Jun raised an eyebrow. The ghost of that almost smile appeared again. "I want to speak to my brother. Not now. Not tonight. But before I do anything else for you, I need to hear his voice and know he's okay." She held the card between 2 fingers. "That's it. That's all I'm asking." Yoo Jun looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Done." And he walked through the hidden door. We are heading into the final stretch, the ending that will leave viewers absolutely speechless. If this story has you hooked, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. The passage behind the bookshelf was narrow and dimly lit, the kind of space that had been built specifically to not exist on any floor plan. The walls were bare concrete. The air was cool and smelled like dust and something metallic. A single strip of LED lighting ran along the floor, casting just enough light to see 3 steps ahead and nothing more. Sarah followed Yoo Jun. Marco followed Sarah. Nobody spoke. Her mind was running faster than her feet. She was cataloging everything, the width of the passage, the slight downward slope of the floor, the way Yoo Jun moved through it without hesitation, without checking anything, which meant he had walked this exact route enough times that his body had memorized it the way a body memorizes a childhood home. This was not an emergency exit. This was a regular exit. This man left rooms through hidden doors the way other people left through the front. That told her something about the life he lived. About how normal the abnormal had become for him. She thought about Kofi again. Her brother had always been the adventurous one, the one who leaned toward the flame while Sarah pulled him back. She had spent her whole life being the careful one, the sensible one, the one who read the room and chose the safe corner. And here she was, walking through a secret passage behind a mafia boss at midnight because she had picked up a business card and said yes. Kofi would have laughed himself to tears. The passage ended at a door that opened into a service stairwell. Yoo Jun pushed through it without breaking stride. They descended 4 flights in silence, their footsteps echoing against gray concrete, the distant thud of party music fading further above them with every floor. At the bottom, another door. This one opened into a loading bay at the back of the building, a wide concrete space, harsh fluorescent lighting, 2 black vehicles parked and running with their lights off. A man stood beside the nearest car. He was young, maybe 25, with a careful face and the particular alertness of someone who had been waiting and was good at it. He looked at Yoo Jun, then at Sarah, then back at Yoo Jun, a question in his eyes that he was too disciplined to ask out loud. "She's with me," Yoo Jun said. "Take her to the Meridian. East Wing. Tell them she gets a room and whatever she needs." He glanced at Sarah. "Your things at the motel. What's left there?" "1 suitcase. My laptop. Some cash." He looked at the young man. "Stop by the Harlow Grand Motel on Clement Street first. Room." He looked at her again. 14, she said. "Room 14. Collect her belongings. Nobody follows you, and if they do, you know what to do." He said the last part without drama, like he was reminding someone to carry an umbrella. The young man nodded once and opened the car door. Sarah didn't move immediately. She stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the loading bay and looked at Yoo Jun and felt the full weight of what she was stepping in to settle across her shoulders. It was heavy. She wanted to be honest with herself about that. It was heavy and it was dangerous, and the man standing in front of her was not a good man in the conventional sense of the word. He controlled things that hurt people. He made decisions she would probably never know the full details of, and she was certain that several of those decisions had not ended well for whoever was on the receiving end. But her brother was alive. And this man was the only door she had found in 4 months that was actually open. "You said done," she said. "About hearing Kofi's voice. I need to know when." 48 hours, Yoo Jun said. "That's 2 days. I'm aware of how hours work." She almost smiled despite herself. Almost. "Fine. 48 hours. And if it doesn't happen, it will happen." She studied his face. That calm, unreadable face that had not shifted more than a millimeter all evening. "Do you always keep your word?" He held her gaze. "I always keep my word," he said. "It's the only currency in my world that doesn't devalue." She believed him. She didn't know if that made her smart or foolish, probably both, but she believed him. She picked up the edge of her jacket, looked down at the white card still in her hand, and slid it into her pocket. Then she got in the car. Yoo Jun watched the vehicle pull out of the loading bay and disappear into the Harlow night. Marco appeared at his shoulder the way Marco always appeared, without announcement, without sound, simply there. "You're trusting her," Marco said. It wasn't quite an accusation. More like a flag being planted so it could be pointed to later. "I'm using her," Yoo Jun corrected quietly. "There's a difference. She doesn't know what she's walked into." "No. But she's steady." He turned back toward the stairwell door. She had a gun pressed to her head and she didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't collapse. She argued. A pause. "That's useful." Marco said nothing. He had learned over many years that when Yoo Jun called something useful, it was the highest compliment he would offer, and further discussion was a waste of everyone's time. They went back inside. The Meridian was not what Sarah expected. She had imagined somewhere cold and transactional, a safe house with bare walls and a mattress on the floor. What she got was a hotel. A real one. Marble floors, warm lighting, the quiet hum of a building that understood discretion. The young man, he told her his name was Ray, nothing else, just Ray, walked her through a side entrance and spoke to a woman at a private desk who did not ask Sarah for identification or a credit card or any of the things hotels normally asked for. She was taken to a room on the east wing, 8th floor. It was not a suite. Yoo Jun was not performing luxury, but it was clean and warm and the bed was wide and there was a window that looked out over a quieter part of the city where the lights were low and amber and the streets were almost empty. Her suitcase arrived 40 minutes later. Ray set it inside the door, told her someone would be in contact tomorrow, and left. She was alone. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her cracked phone screen and felt everything she had been holding back all evening begin to move through her body like a tide coming in. Her hands were shaking properly now. She let them. She pressed them together between her knees and let the shaking happen because there was nobody watching and she had earned it. Kofi was alive. She said it out loud in the empty room because it needed to exist in the air and not just in her head. Kofi is alive. Her voice cracked on his name and she let it crack too. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and breathed through it, the relief and the fear and the anger and the grief of 4 months all arriving at the same time, competing for space in her chest, none of them willing to wait. She cried for approximately 4 minutes. She was not a person who cried for long, not because she was tough in the way people romanticize toughness, but because crying had never solved a single problem in her life, and her life had contained a significant number of problems. She gave it 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face, drank a full glass of water from the bathroom tap, sat back on the bed, and started thinking. Lila. She needed to understand Lila. Not for revenge. She was too tired and too practical for revenge as a primary motivator, but because Lila was a thread and threads led somewhere. Someone had sent Lila to that cafe. Someone had told her to find Sarah, build her trust, and deliver her to that penthouse party in a way that looked natural. That required knowing Sarah was in Harlow. That required knowing she was looking for Kofi. That required knowing that Kofi's name meant something to Yoo Jun. Which meant whoever was pulling Lila's strings knew more about Kofi's situation than Sarah did. And possibly more than Yoo Jun had told her tonight. She fell asleep sitting up against the headboard with all of this turning in her head. When she woke up, it was 4 in the morning, and the city outside her window was the particular shade of dark that existed for only an hour before the first gray light of morning began to bleed in at the edges. Her phone had a message. Unknown number. 2 words. Sleep well. She stared at it. Then she typed back, "Do you watch everyone you've threatened with a gun sleep?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, Marco watches. I review reports. She almost laughed. She put the phone face down on the mattress and lay down properly, and this time when she closed her eyes she slept without dreaming. 41 hours later, her phone rang. She was sitting at the small desk by the window eating a bowl of noodles Ray had brought up an hour ago without being asked, going through everything she could remember about Kofi's last few months of contact, the things he had said, the things he had carefully not said, the background sounds on their phone calls that she had never paid enough attention to at the time and was now mining for detail. She picked up on the first ring. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. Then, Sarah. Her entire body stopped. His voice. Older somehow, not in age but in weight. The way a person's voice gets heavier when they have been carrying something difficult for a long time. But his voice. Unmistakably, completely, entirely his. Kofi. She stood up without realizing she had stood up. Kofi, oh my God. I know. His voice was tight with something she recognized as the male version of what she had done on the edge of that bed 2 nights ago, the forced steadiness of someone refusing to fall apart. I know. I'm okay. I'm okay, Z. I promise. You absolute idiot, she whispered. You complete and total idiot, Kofi. I have been. I know. I'm sorry. A breath. I'm so sorry. I got into something I couldn't get back out of, and then everything moved so fast and I couldn't contact you without putting you at risk, and he stopped. Reset. Are you safe? Right now, are you safe? I'm in a hotel. I'm fine. Which hotel? The Meridian. A pause that was a half-second too long. Sarah. How did you end up at the Meridian? It's a long story. Tell me the short version. I accidentally walked into a room I wasn't supposed to walk into, and now I'm apparently working with the man whose room it was to figure out how to get you home." She said it as plainly as she could. There was a sharp silence on the other end. "Kofi. Sarah, listen to me very carefully." His voice had changed. The emotion was gone, not because he didn't feel it, but because something more urgent had taken the wheel. "Whatever he's told you, whatever deal he's offered you, you need to understand that you are not standing on the outside of this looking in anymore. You are inside it now. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes." "Be careful. Be smart. Watch everything and trust nothing you can't verify yourself." Another breath. "He's not a bad man the way movies make bad men. He's more complicated than that. But complicated doesn't mean safe." "I know," she said quietly. "Do you?" She looked at the white card sitting on the desk beside her noodle bowl. At the single phone number on it. At the city through the window. Harlow spreading out in every direction, full of people living lives that had nothing to do with this, blissfully unaware of what moved through its veins after dark. "I walked into his room by accident," she said. "But I'm not leaving by accident. I'm going to get you out, Kofi. I don't care what it takes." Her brother was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so soft she almost missed it. "You were always the brave one. You just never knew it." The line went dead. She stood in the middle of the hotel room for a long moment. Then she picked up the white card, turned it over in her fingers, and dialed the number on it. He picked up on the second ring. "I spoke to my brother," she said. "I know," Yoo Jun said. "I'm in. But I need to know everything. Not the version you decided I could handle. Everything." A pause. Longer than his usual pauses. Then, "Come to the East office. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. I'll be there at 7:55, she said. She hung up first this time. She set the phone down and looked at the city and felt something she hadn't felt since she arrived in Harlow. Not hope exactly, but the solid, grounded predecessor to hope. The feeling of footing. Of knowing which direction she was walking in, even if she couldn't yet see how far the road went. Kofi was alive. She had heard his voice. And tomorrow she was going to walk into another room she probably wasn't supposed to be in, but this time she would do it with her eyes wide open. And that is where we leave Sarah Mensah tonight. A girl who walked into the wrong room and found the one thing 4 months of searching couldn't give her. A real lead, a dangerous ally, and a brother who was still breathing. But this is only the beginning. Because whoever sent Lila to that cafe is still out there. And they now know that Sarah exists. And in Yoo Jun's world, being known is the most dangerous thing you can be. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for watching. Genuinely. You didn't have to stay, but you did, and that means everything. If this story gripped you, if Sarah had you nervous, if Yoo Jun had you curious, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be seen by more people. Subscribe if you haven't already, because more stories are coming and you do not want to miss them. And drop a comment below. Do you trust Yoo Jun? Or is Sarah walking into something even bigger than she thinks? Let me know. I read every single one.